One, two, three. Could the bearded guy say something? I want to see how the voice sounds.
Hello, my name is Morgan. Welcome to my world.
Okay. Well, hey, welcome to the Teams Podcast, TEAMS, Technology, Engineering, the Arts, Mathematics, and Scientists. And today I'm so excited to have one of my most favorite STEM people on the planet. His name is Morgan Fairchild. Did I get that right?
Rockwell, but it's close.
Morgan Rockwell. Thank you. And today we're going to talk about the world of non-recreational use mushrooms. Morgan is a highly respected mycologist and president of the San Diego Mycological...
Vice president.
Vice president,
Second
thank
in
you,
charge. Yeah.
of the San Diego Mycological Society. But today we're going to hear a little bit about Morgan and his journey through technology spaces that he's traveled through and where he sees technology right now. And we'll finish off with what the world changing non-recreational use of mushroom technology that's in his brain and in his research lab and really waiting to go public to solve some of the greatest problems that's going on in society right now. Morgan, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, I'm glad to have you here. At the tail end of the podcast, I definitely want to find out like what a morning in the life of Morgan is, because you shared with me about certain news events that technology is involved in. You're quite knowledgeable about AI, but like when you wake up, what are things that inform you on the day's events? But before that, Morgan, tell us about your journey.
I started in San Diego, in California here. My parents were military kids, Navy and Marines, so I grew up in Chula Vista, California, and I was lucky enough to have
Mom Navy, Dad Marine?
mom's dad was Navy, dad Marine.
Okay, great.
And mom's dad was electrical engineer, and he definitely inspired me to learn how to use computers and machines. He taught me how to solder and deal with batteries and the basics of electrical circuits since I was a little child. I could say 2 or 3 I knew how a battery and voltage and watts worked because of him. And he found me as like his son. He had 3 daughters, and so me and my older cousin were the only men in the family as kids. So he adopted us as his actual sons because he had 3 daughters. So he put all his son knowledge into me and my older cousin, mechanics and electronics. So I always had a garage available of tools and soldering pens and batteries and working on cars and things like that. And my dad, he kind of did the same route with me, but he let me learn a little bit about nature. Taught me how to cut wood, how to weld, how to do plumbing and solder, because he was a construction worker for his trade after he got out of the Marines. Mm-hmm. So from both of those men, I got the very early age of how to use a tool, which I think is like really vital, because I think, we learn how to play with our toys. I played with Legos, built a lot of modular thinking, I could build anything because I have the map.
Yeah, Lego's fantastic.
Totally changed my brain, And erector sets and Lincoln logs. How to build a wooden house, how to build a mechanical bolts and screw device, and then how to stack Legos together. Those are my roots. And so my grandpa and dad saw that I was good at building things. So my dad gave me a hammer and a screwdriver, and my grandpa gave me a wrench and a soldering pen. And my grandpa had keyboards, Yamaha music equipment, beat machines. He showed me how to take apart circuits because they would break. We're going to solder this and fix the keyboard.
Wow, that's what a blessing.
Yeah, and my dad, he taught me how to carve. He was a wood carver, so he taught me how to use chisels and hammers. He would do plumbing occasionally. I would help him with solder and plumbing parts. Sweating copper pipe together with him. He showed me how to hold a torch and solder at like 5 years old. So trusting a young child with a dangerous tool was it was great. You know.
Let me jump in here. What was your first tech job?
Oh, tech. Actually, in first grade, I wasn't paid, but I was the one that set up all the computers in first grade. My first grade teacher asked if anyone knew how computers worked, and I actually wired up maybe 10 Apple II computers for the first grade class, plugged them in, turned them on, set them up with the first programs, because the teacher did not know how it worked. So I
networking cable?
Well, mostly because no, we didn't have the internet, but it was individually setting up each Apple II with number crunchers and Oregon Trail so that the kids could use these games.
So it's peer-to-peer?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And it, so I could say I was like 6, 7 years old, so that was 1993.
Well, how about paid tech job? That's a great story, though, by the way.
So it started young.
Yeah.
And paid when I was in middle school. I built a website for Hilltop Middle here in San Diego. And I was a computer aide, so I wasn't paid to do that. But the teacher who taught me how to build websites on Adobe Dreamweaver and a Macromedia Flash, he encouraged me to go downtown to Chula Vista and file for doing business as, start my own business. So before I ever got paid by anyone, I actually started my web designing company at 15, and I started building HTML-based websites with Flash animated user interfaces for people. Made a couple $1,000s in the first year at 15 selling websites to people. And this was long before MySpace and anyone had.
What years was this?
That was 1998, 1999, and then in 2000 to 2001, I went in high school, 9th grade, and then 9/11 happened. And so all of my computer education was pre-millennial, you know, and if you were around in those times, you understand that a lot of things changed after 2000 computer-wise. We didn't have the iPhone until 2004, Facebook till 2004, Google wasn't even really there till 2001.
Windows 95.
All of it. So there was a massive internet and mobile shift after 2000, 2001. I was already learning the economy and running my own business, and my dad was running his own business. And when 9/11 happened, the economy did a drastic change. So that was my first lesson on maybe I should go work for someone else, because running my own business is a challenge as a kid with no friends and no partners at this time, and the economy did a massive dump at that time. So it was a mutual lesson that if I want to be in the tech industry, I might have to go find someone who would hire me instead of doing it by myself.
Which is the biggest question people need to understand before they go into business for themselves, because in my experience, the difference is where's the risk. If you're in business by yourself, the risk is all on you, and in a current event, moment notice, you're done. Whereas you become a W-2 employee somewhere, somebody else is taking the risk. You might not get as much pay or much creativity or much freedom, but still you have a paycheck.
Security. My dad always liked to say job security. He knew I was a computer nerd, and he knew I would be a computer engineer one day, but he always told me, I'm going to teach you how to work on a toilet and change a wax ring. I go, why? I don't want to do that. He goes, it's job security. Everyone on earth has a toilet, and no matter what happens with your goals, if someone needs someone to fix a toilet, you'll be the one guy that knows how to do it, and you'll always have a job. So it was a good perspective to humble a very high thinking intellectual computer person to go, you better learn how to change a toilet.
Basic thing, they'll never be technically replaced.
So I use that as a spectrum of tool and technology. I can go on a very high end on building neural networks and doing biological computers and artificial intelligence, self-driving cars, all the way down to metric and standard measurements of nuts and bolts on a toilet. And the basics of that, to me, it's all the same stuff. It's engineering and building has no class. A toilet to me is no different than artificial intelligence. You should know how they work. Same with a car engine or a cell phone, you know.
Well, I can tell you in all practical sense, dating a young lady and she has a problem in her condo related to plumbing or whatever.
Oh,
it's
been
totally
great.
cool to be a guy.
Yeah.
And
I fixed a lot of girls' bathrooms.
yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Far out.
But it's also it's a self-esteem thing. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been by myself as a programmer or a technology person. I've been self-employed most of my life. But also, I don't really want to depend on another person, mostly a man, to fix my home, to fix things.
Yeah.
I feel it strengthens the ego and the character a little bit to know that I could do most of that stuff by
Well, it
myself.
also saves you a ton of money.
Yeah, yeah. There's a meme on the internet like, oh, how did you learn you're a plumber and electrician and this? Did you go to school for this? Like, no, I grew up poor. I would have died. You know, I had to learn this. So.
Or even now, 10-minute videos on YouTube. Boom. Yeah. I know how to check the fluid in my transmission. Whatever.
I use YouTube University to fix a lot of things in cars.
Oh, yeah.
There's always someone else that's dealt with the problem. And I think for technology and learning, there's constant things. Like we have this new state of AI and GPT and all this stuff. I learned so much from YouTube and TikTok, just kids putting stuff out every day that they're learning. So
it's a great time in history to live.
Yeah.
I say Google and YouTube, and you can learn anything you want in 10 minutes. But anyway, so I understand you worked in the government, you had some time in Bitcoin. What other jobs highlight before we get to mushroom technology?
In 2003, 4, 5, I focused on masonry and doing construction, and it was a good paying job. And I was very motivated to get a full-time computer job at the time. So started studying different programming languages and actually started studying economic things like Forex, foreign trading exchanges, because I wanted to be involved in building digital money or digital payment services. Like PayPal was really big, and I thought maybe I'd get a job at PayPal, you know. And in 2008, I was in the mix with the Occupy Wall Street folks, the anonymous hacker people, and I was learning a lot about programming and dedicated denial of service and all of the cyber warfare like things that were coming to the public view because of that, and how there was angst with the financial system and how hackers were doing protests with groups of people in front of banks. And that led me to be put on the email list for the Bitcoin white paper before the code was released. And so I was one of the first couple dozen people to read the white paper of the idea of Bitcoin. And at the time I was learning how to do Internet of Things devices, how to wire machines to machines. And so a couple months of...
What year is this again?
2008.
2008.
Right when Obama became president.
Yeah.
And then the end of 2008, the election happens. And then about April 2009, Bitcoin's code is released on the internet. At that time, I was heavily working on Internet of Things, and I was doing internship at Google to work on artificial intelligence systems. What now is the basis of the at-home Google speaker that you speak to, the version of Alexa that Google has. Yeah. I was working on that in 2009, beta testing it. So I learned a little bit about AI, learned a little bit about digital currency, and then when Bitcoin gets released, I decided to become a full-time programmer because I thought it was a revolutionary change to not just like money, but computer science. And I thought it was going to be the next level of the internet, and I wanted to be involved. I was too young to work on TCP/IP or the World Wide Web. They came out when I was a child. Yeah. But Bitcoin to me was the upgrade of the internet. So I heavily focused and put my full time on it. Yeah. And I spent now 14 years almost working full time in Bitcoin. Did a lot of consulting and built a lot of protocols, built the first Bitcoin ATM at my shop in my garage. And then me and my partner created something called BitCongress, which was the first voting protocol built on a blockchain, which allowed anyone in the internet to vote on things. And so I focused almost a third of my life on that. And that led me to be a consultant and engineer for the US Army as a civilian scientist. Yeah. I helped them figure out how Bitcoin worked. And then I also did that work almost full time in Las Vegas for the casinos, where I hoped Bitcoin would be used at the gambling level. So I spent 10 years in Las Vegas advocating for Bitcoin, and Nevada had a lot of laws passed around the positive use of Bitcoin in the casino environment. So I became a lobbyist, a consultant, more than wiring, soldering, programming, actually teaching the government and companies and institutions why they should be using this technology.
Great. I want you to make me a promise.
Sure.
We do a podcast at another time.
Yeah.
And would like to talk about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Selfishly, I want to understand it, and and you're somewhat qualified to explain it to, at least to me, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of listeners to our podcast would be interested to hear in your experience, contribution with Bitcoin, and any other stuff.
I have a lot of history there.
Yes.
And exactly. I know there's a lot of good teachers that do the basics or the complications of what this thing is, how it works. But most of them have not been there since the beginning, like me. And so I do have a little bit of the history in my mind. Also, the people who are involved are really important. Technology usually gets talked about by itself, but it in my opinion, the people involved and their motivations are really important on appreciating a technology. Okay. Like I've gotten to meet Vince Cerf, and I know he made TCP/IP. And if you don't know who that person is, you just think of the internet as kind of a thing, but it's really an idea from a guy for a reason. Yeah. And I like to know the people involved, and I'm privileged to know almost all the people who were involved in Bitcoin, which there's stories and people-centric things. It's not just code, you know? Yeah. Okay, so I have a question for you that will be kind of the critical mass of our time today. Sure. Okay, I'm a scientist, and I'm really into mushroom spores because I really want to pursue the non-recreational space of mushrooms. Yeah. Where do I go to get spores to solve a particular problem that I want to solve? That's one half of the question. The other part of the question is, I'm a person that likes to be out and see the animals and smell the earth and see the sunrises and sunsets. And I like to dig around, and fungi interests me. Yeah. And I know where certain species of fungi, mushrooms, whatever, live. But I want to harvest and I want to collect all these things because I want to sit back and say, yeah, I was responsible for finding in this particular region of the world. Is there anything I could do, I could create to help out the guys that want to go out in the dirt, and then the white coats that want to stay nice, squeaky clean, and just deal with Petri dishes? What do I do? That is exactly what my company is working on. What's your company called? Mycosoft. 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 And we'll put the website URL in this podcast. Mycosoft.org. So what I focused on now is those exact tools that connect the forest to the lab. So like you say, if you're wandering the woods and you find something, you see some magical, colorful mushroom, you don't know necessarily what it is unless you're a good identifier and an expert. You've seen it before, or you have one of your little field books that says maybe this is what it is. The problem is you grab that thing, you don't really have a place to put it. So you could take it and consume it yourself if it's food. You say thing. You grab that thing. The mushroom. The actual mushroom itself. Yeah, and you know, there's a wide range of fungus. There are things that doesn't look like a capped mushroom, that looks like slime on a log, or looks like very little stringy, clear white mesh mycelium that's growing out of the ground. You may not be able to identify that if it's not a colorful mushroom cap. All of that stuff is fungus. The problem is, no matter what, if you take that sample out of the woods, unless you have a relationship with laboratories or pharmaceutical companies, you have no idea where to take it and give it and record it or save it. Now, there are amateur mycologists, people who are just into this themselves, who will take it home, put it in a petri dish, let it grow a couple weeks, and then basically clone that mushroom, put it on some sawdust and a sterile sawdust bag of wood. The mushroom will eat the wood and grow into new mushrooms. So people are growing at-home mushrooms in a way that, well, I found this in the woods, I'm going to grow it at home. There's a very simple way to do that, The problem is you have to go find that species to grow that species. Now, there's about 20 mushrooms on Earth that a lot of people grow at home, and they're mostly the food mushrooms that people want to sell at farmers markets, or a couple grocery stores may sell these mushrooms. They include things like lion's mane or...
Question. So in essence, you put a sensor in the ground and it would pull up data, it would identify?
Well, one of the things that we're doing is we're building a device to leave in the forest to monitor when mushrooms are growing and how they're growing and if they're growing healthy or not.
Does it get inserted in the earth, or you just lay it on top?
No, you definitely put it in the ground. In the ground, there's 300 miles of fungus filaments called mycelium for every square foot of soil in the woods.
There's a picture of this device on your website, right?
Yeah.
So I'll get a picture and I'll have it attached easily.
So one of those core products that we're trying to do is put a sensing device out in the woods to be left alone for a long period of time to basically connect the forest.
Do you have a name for this sensing device?
We call it the mycotenna.
Mycotenna, like antenna,
pretty much.
Mycotenna.
Yeah, it plugs into the ground and broadcasts the biological signals over the internet. So that there's a sensor out there monitoring the life cycle of the forest.
Do you have any competitors, anybody doing this that you know?
Not necessarily. It's more of a scientific research device, so that there's not really too much commercial.
So if I'm an investor, because I saw you at a pitch night a while back.
Yeah.
What 3 important problems does your sensor, your mycoantenna, solve, and how do I understand this is not anything to do with psilocybin and the goofy drug use of marijuana or mushrooms?
So mushrooms are either they get you high, they kill you, or they're food to most people. Those are the 3 subjects. At Mycosoft, we believe there's a 4th subject: the industrial use. Of fungi. Now,
I'm going to put that in.
Yeah.
Okay. Non-recreational, world-changing industrial use of mushrooms. So we got those 3 elements there, and that should keep at least me not thinking about funny colors and goofiness.
And so I'll explain it very simply. Like a fungus can be used as a material. Mm-hmm. So you can grow fungus as a replacement for concrete, for rubber, for clothing like textile. Just like hemp, it could be made into hats and shoes and blankets. You could also harden it into like blocks like concrete, or you can also make it pliable like rubber. So material growing out of fungus where it's biodegradable if you want it to be, or it's long lasting if you want it to be, depending on how you cook it. It's literally a recyclable, back into the soil replacement for plastic, for styrofoam, for rubber, for concrete. It's a environmentally friendly material. That's one industrial use of fungus. Another use is all plants on Earth have roots. Roots do not eat rock out of the ground, out of the soil. It's the fungus that eats the rock, the nitrogen and the calcium out of the rock, and feeds that to a root. The root then exchanges sugar from the chlorophyll, from the photosynthesis. The plant gives sugars to the fungus, and the fungus gives minerals out of the rocks to the root. So there's a thing called mycorrhizal, where a fungus and a root are sharing nutrients. So plants would not be alive anywhere on Earth unless fungus were eating the rock, giving them nutrients. And in exchange, the fungus gets something out of the plants, because the fungus don't have chlorophyll. They don't make their own sugars. So all fertilizers, all soil, all nutritional elements for plants and farming are based on fungus. You have to put fungus in your soils, in your fertilizers to make plants efficient. That's just the basics of fertilizer. So an industrial use of mushrooms would also be food for plants.
So I can understand that. So does that mean the fungus would eliminate the bad and turn that digestive process of eating, for lack of better words, the bad, and then producing the nourishment for the real plants or whatever you're trying to grow?
It's a balance. So like nitrogen is a very important fertilizer for plants. They need it. If there's too much nitrogen, plants will die. If there's no nitrogen, they don't have food. So no matter the amount of nitrogen in rock, in the soil, a fungus will eat all of it, distribute the right amount to the plant in a way that it's not going to hurt the plant. Like, it's actually the regulator of this. So if there's not enough, it'll put out more than it's normally going to do. If there's too much, it will regulate it and hold it back. It actually works with plants in a symbiotic way. That's where the word symbiote comes from, is really fungus working with plants. So that's one, related to materials and fertilizer. I think the more important industrial use of mushrooms, which hasn't really been done to this day, we have mushrooms and fungi making medicines. You could call that an industrial use. But mining, pulling metals and oil and plastic out of the ground is one of the most efficient things a mushroom can do, or a fungus can do. It can literally bioaccumulate lithium, gold, silver, lead out of the ground into its fruiting bodies, into the mushrooms, and clean the ground, the soil, out of metal. It can also eat plastics, heavy plastics, and oil, which nothing on earth other than fungus and maybe a few bacterium can make plastic go away. So it would eat plastic, digest it into hydrocarbons, into sugar. A better version of a hydrocarbon than oil or gas is a sugar. And then you could eat the mushroom, or plants or animals could eat the mushroom, where you can't eat the plastic. It would get you sick and poison you. The mushroom will convert plastic into edible sugars. So as a recycler of the pollution and the dirty things on earth, whether it's heavy metals or oils, petroleum products, mushrooms can mine lithium out of a dead lithium mine that people have abandoned because it's too inefficient. Okay. You just put oyster mushrooms on that lithium mine. They will pull all the lithium and gold and silver and lead out of the ground, and then you could basically pull the metal out of the mushrooms in an efficient way.
Would that be like an application to solve what people don't know how to solve, is all the raw elements that we're making these Tesla batteries from?
Lithium,
and when they
time.
become non-rechargeable and they got to go back into the Argentinian earth that we got it from?
We could literally feed those to oyster mushrooms and bioaccumulate the lithium out.
Why is that word not out? I mean,
there's a lot of white papers from research on bioaccumulation of metal.
Okay.
But what I'm saying, and maybe my company's not the first, but it's one of the first trying to do the technological advancement of how can we use that. And so using an oyster mushroom as almost a mining tool is what we're trying to package the data and the actual spore element as a product, like a biological machine. If we have this mushroom, we need a container that we can take it to a mine. We need a way to distribute it in the mine healthily that's not going to damage the rest of the environment. And we also need a way to accumulate all those mushrooms that are full of metal afterwards. So there's technology that needs to be made to use an oyster mushroom as a machine, a biological machine, whether it's containers, distributing it, gathering it, and then we pull the metal out of what we do at the end, and now we're a healthy, efficient mine when mining with machines and chemicals was not efficient and safe.
Question. So this is in regards to the balance you said that the mushroom figures out.
Yes.
Now, we figured out in science labs how to produce the flavor of strawberry or chocolate or whatever. Do you think, or can human beings right now produce that balance in the lab, or is it always going to be left up to the mushroom?
Okay, so on a philosophical...
Real quick, was that a yes or no?
No. We're not there yet.
Not now.
No, because we do not field test fungus and mushrooms like we do in the lab, because we don't have the equipment to test mushrooms out in the field,
like
in
a
their environment
type thing,
or a petri dish. So we take a mushroom out of the forest and we put it in a petri dish in a clean room. We watch it grow. It is not growing the same way it would grow in the ground with bacterium and plants and insects. It is technically mutated and doing something different.
Erosion and weather.
It needs that environmental stimulus to grow in its real efficient way, where we learn the organism for real. So like an equivalent, we can see how a deer acts in the forest. If you put a deer in the zoo, it's going to act a little differently, especially if it's by itself, right? Same with the tiger and a bear. You put them in the zoo, you make a fake environment, they're not going to act the same. They'll play with balls and the seals will honk horns. They don't do that in nature. They do different things. Same with dolphins and all of that. So imagine a mushroom in a zoo, in a lab.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not acting the way it would naturally. And actually you're cutting its efficiency and all of the magical things that it is doing in nature that you aren't even aware of.
Mm-hmm.
You're not observing those now. So what we want to do is National Geographic. We want to take the cameras and the petri dishes and the DNA sequencers and the sensors out into the woods so we could observe it in its environment.
Excellent. Okay.
So that's an important element that once that's done, more industrial uses will be discovered, more ways of using mushrooms for mining, for material making, for medicine making will be discovered, and then the samples of those mushrooms that we need to do those things will now be put in a spore bank in a library, which at this time there is no place to get those spores. You have to go to your farmer's market, or you have to find someone online who maybe has that mushroom.
Or you mentioned like some nerd in his garage.
Yeah, and so it's like to be the equivalent, before cannabis was legal in the United States, there was a guy that always had seeds somewhere, and you had to know him. Mm-hmm. Now you can go buy seeds on an industrial scale, just like you could wheat and corn and rice. Mm-hmm. Spores, fungus, they're not in a database yet, and they're not in a spore lab like a seed bank. So we don't have all of them in one Home Depot of spores. Yeah. That's really the long-term goal of our company.
Home Depot of spores.
All the materials, huge. All the tools in one spot.
So, are you providing a product or a service?
Both.
Both.
Right now we have 3 devices we've built.
And is the product and the service both named the same thing?
No, we're trying to do a full suite. So we have the sensor, the Mycotenna, that is the eyeballs and the ears in the woods. It's learning. We also have a device called Spore Base, which is a spore collecting device that collects spores on a tape cassette. And we put that in the air on a tree, in a building, in front of a school, anywhere, and it's collecting the spores out of the wind. Mm-hmm. So we could take those back and grow those, or we could identify dangerous fungus, or we can use those as a timestamp when that fungus was in the air. And our other device is a device that is literally smelling fungus with a robot nose called a volatile compound sensor, and it's basically alerting you on a computer, hey, there's this fungus is here, maybe go dig for it, go look for it. So we're trying to make the technology that you have the collector out there, the sensor out there, and also the hey, alarm going off in your hand, on your phone, on your belt, the device that's smelling for mushrooms and saying, like a dog or a pig, hey, there's a mushroom here. So we're bringing the technology out to the field to discover, collect, and pay attention to fungus.
Okay.
And right now those tools are not available to scientists, amateurs, professionals. We're still using 1950s technology to find mushrooms.
So do you have anything right now implanted in the earth somewhere around San Diego County?
We have a couple of our Mycotennas. We have 3 of them being tested. And in San Dimas, where we've manufactured our spore base up near LA, we have 7 of our spore prototypes.
Is that near Bonelli Park?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we have 7 of the prototypes up there being tested right now, because we've actually just applied for a U.S. Army grant for the spore base device, because the military is very keen on wanting to know what's in the air. And so we're trying to market that device, particularly right now, to the Army to pay attention to what's happening in front of a base.
Do you think there'd be a fire department application?
Big time.
Air analytics?
Oh, it's an aerosol detector. Yeah. So we focus on fungus, but our device can collect fungus, pollen, virus, bacterium, chemical on a tape cassette. So imagine air quality management in front of a hospital, a school, a military base, a border, a park, a record of, was the air bad this day? Was it good this day? And also, what was in the air?
Attribution.
Where we could take the tape with the fungus spores or the virus on it, go put it in a petri dish, grow it, and learn more about it. But we have an exact timestamp of when it was in the air. Okay. So that's a product that's going to help us pay attention, but also collect tissue out of the air.
I thought I knew everything about what you do, and that you just created like 8,000 more questions, which is going to set up another podcast. So now I got 2 podcast promises from you.
I appreciate it.
So does AI fit into this plan, and how?
So we use a particular sensor in our multiple devices. It's called a VOC, a volatile organic compound sensor. It's made by Bosch, the company that makes lots of things. Yeah. Okay, it's called a Bosch 688. The Bosch 688 is basically a robot nose that smells hydrogen, carbon, sulfur, nitrogen, different elements. And depending on the combination of those elements, that is either 2-stroke, 4-stroke, diesel, bear shit, deer shit, a certain plant over a certain plant. There's a profile of smell that is measured in hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, sulfur. Different elements can say that is that thing that I'm smelling. That is done through AI, where it is training itself, just like the neural networks in AI are doing the picture training on a dog is a dog or a cat picture is a cat picture. When you say cat, a cat picture will show up because it did a lot of training.
Yeah.
So we are training out in the field all the smells of all the fungus, all the plants, all the insects, all the fecal matter of every animal, and we're training that in the Bosch platform, where its neural network is going, oh, that's a 2-stroke engine of smell of fuel, or that's a 4-stroke engine, or that's diesel.
So it'll be sensitive to only mushrooms eventually, right?
Well, they have those profiles for all the smells.
Oh,
and what we are contributing now to this $20 sensor, the Bosch 688, is they have no fungal data. So what we're doing is we're training it on truffles, on oyster mushrooms, on lion's mane, and we're also putting it out in the field next to our spore collector. So when a spore is found, we now have the volatile compound sensor data of what it smelled when that spore was there too. So that is, to me, a pioneering thing that no one else is doing, is using AI for smells. And we do a lot of eyes, cameras in AI, pictures.
Yeah.
Google and Apple are good at that. We do a lot of sounds where AI is analyzing what music's playing in the room, Shazam and things like that.
Yeah.
I think one of the untapped worlds is the nose,
Yeah.
the smells. And if AI can learn the biological smells of the world as well as the sensors in the ground of what's happening, we're going to have AI become very aware of the living things on Earth, in the air, in the ground. And right now, there's not too many companies plugging into the ground, breathing the air.
Well, I certainly know a battlefield application because of chemical
Big time.
war.
CBRE.
We have pieces of tape.
Yes. Yes,
I think it's still that way.
Well, you
like a bug strip.
So you have military experience. I have some in my family, and we know we have the chemical detectors, the radiological detectors, like a Geiger counter.
NBC.
Yeah.
Nuclear, biological, chemical.
Chemical, biological, radiological, all of it, right? So the biological detector, very inefficient. We would love to have something the size of your phone that's smelling the air and collecting the air and saying, oh, here's a sample of what was in the air.
At this time of day,
yes.
A point in time.
And it's also will save people's lives, but it also will say, hey, the air quality is not good outside. Maybe you shouldn't go outside right now. We just saw New York go black from all the fires in Canada, right? So you don't need to look out the window to go, I shouldn't be outside breathing. But sometimes you don't know.
You got to see if it's progressing, if it's dissipating, or if it's getting thicker, right?
And so we see lots of customer application uses of fungus in the United States. Military money is always key. DoD money is always there. But the scientific community doesn't always have the most money. But we focus on building these tools for the mycologist to be able to gather something from the woods and give it to a lab coat. A pharmaceutical company, because there's money for them. If they can bring something from the forest to the lab will pay for that. Also, the mycologist wants to have the petri dish and the microscope, the better tools. And we've not advanced the tools in almost 60 years. So we're going to give a new suite of digital smartphone-like tools to people gathering tissue out in nature, biological scientists. And that's not just mycologists, that's herbologists, insectarian people, anyone who wants to study plants, animals, insects. They need more tools to do it outside. The lab wants to know what's going on out there, and a guy in a lab coat not necessarily wants to walk out in the woods.
There are so many questions that myself, and I'm sure the listeners have, but we've got 3 minutes left on this podcast. You promised me there's the other ones, right?
I'll do as many as you want.
So I want to learn what like a day in the life of you as a mycologist. How do you get your information? Like, what's important to you when you wake up? Like, what you want to know about the world as it relates to current events, that type of thing.
Okay, so
We've got 2 minutes left.
I am highly keen on intelligence. I was raised in an intelligence household, military intelligence.
Like secrets and what
kind
our
of, yeah.
enemies are
James
doing.
Bond stuff is how I was raised,
yeah,
you know?
Good.
So the first thing I do when I wake up is I get up about 5:36 in the morning because I trade on the markets. The first news source I get is Bloomberg and CNBC because they have stock tickers on the news.
Okay.
And no matter how many talking heads...
Like what's in your office with
pretty much.
Bitcoin?
Yeah,
okay.
but everything. You have people telling you the news all the time.
Because we're 3 hours behind when it starts.
Yes,
Yeah.
so you have to be up at 5:36 in Pacific Standard Time. But the people on CNBC and Bloomberg, where the stock tickers are, by law, they're fiduciaries because they're showing money on the screen. So they can't lie to you. All the news in the world could be propaganda and just be entertainment and lie to you and misinform and have their agenda. But the stock channels, by law, because of fiduciary rules, they can't misinform an investor. So the news from the financial news is more accurate than any other news. There still will be agendas in how they speak, but they can't blatantly lie. So that's the first source. And what business is collapsing this morning? What's the prices of gold and silver and Bitcoin and oil and the stock market? That's a factual piece of information I get up in the morning, and it lets me gauge a lot of what's going on in the world. Also, if there's, destabilizing events in the world, whether it's weather or war or an earthquake or a company, the stock channels will tell the truth about that because it's going to affect money. So that's a good source of information.
Okay.
The second I would say is I have Google in my life, all the AI tools, Google on my watch and my phone, and
wearable.
I have Google wake me up as my alarm, tells me to wash my hands, go eat breakfast, says the news is here. It will play CNBC and Bloomberg for 2 minutes each for me in the morning, and then it will tell me my calendar and say you need to go do this and this and this. I have my, like Iron Man assistant. It informs me. And depending on what news I see on the financial news, I'll ask it, can you please tell me about this? And it will go find that from sources I've approved. So I would say when it comes to the world...
Sources you've approved.
Yeah, I've made a list of, I don't like NPR, but I do like BBC. You know what I mean? Like
C-SPAN. It's kind of neutral.
Very factual Congress recordings. So, but not someone telling you their opinion.
Do you think our listeners could get a list?
Oh yeah, you just at Google Home, or if you use Alexa, the Amazon version, or Apple, they have a way in your
But
thing.
you said your reliable sources. Is it out there, or you just copy someone else's list?
They're just what I've chosen.
That's what I'm saying. Could somebody get what your list is?
I would say in the U.S., I only trust the stock channels, CNBC and Bloomberg, but I do listen to Al Jazeera, Russian Times RT, and BBC, because I do like to know the foreign perspectives on things that are happening in the world and the U.S. And those British, Russian, and Saudi Arabia-based news, I'm going to get information there that I won't get from CNBC and Bloomberg because it doesn't affect the money in that way. Other than that, I like social collaborative news like Twitter. I like social collaborative news like TikTok, because I've seen world events like disasters and things show up on TikTok within minutes that I've never seen on the news for days. Like protests and fires and earthquakes or train derailings. I've seen that on TikTok within minutes when I've not seen it anywhere else.
Earthquakes.
So it's a source from the people.
Infrastructure, significant.
And the algorithm will put, if multiple people are putting a video or a picture of something like that out, I will see that a lot, very fast. So I trust the people more than an institution. And the only institutions I trust are multiple sourcing. I wouldn't trust them individually. I would trust them collectively. So if CNBC and Bloomberg say different things and they're the stock companies, I take that as something's going on. They're not consistent. But if I hear a same basic video or statement from 100 people on TikTok and 1,000 people on Twitter, I'm going to be pretty confident that that's really happening. I like crowdfunding, crowdfunding the source and the info.
So it's critical thinking. Okay, that definitely satisfies that answer. Now, my last question of this time. So on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 is you have everything you need for your sensors and for the services you provide.
Yeah.
What's that number where you're at right now?
All right, 3.5.
3.5. And so, as succinctly as we can, pithy,
Yeah.
what are your 3 top needs right now?
Funding is always important.
And how much money?
We just applied for $200,000.
What do you need?
If we get phase 2, we're at $2 million. That would be what we
$2
need.
million right now. If I had $2 million, I'll write you a check. Okay, go ahead.
And then the next need would be using that money to upgrade our facilities, which we're planning on doing if our grants go through, because we need a larger facility for storage collection and
And that's
tissue
the middle
analysis.
zone between
Yes.
the 2 parties I described at the
Yes.
beginning of the podcast. Okay.
We have a lab now to
So
build
that's 2.
things, but we need a bigger lab to build more things.
$3 million and then a facility, right?
Give or take, yeah.
Okay. And then number 3?
Basically, having a recruitment of proper people, HR, which is
Talent.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that.
They would want to come to a good facility that has money.
So if I met you in an elevator.
Yeah.
And, oh, you're the guy on the podcast. I recognize you from the glasses and the beard.
Yeah.
Hey, a lot of stuff just happened to me. I'm blessed with, I got $3 million, and I know a friend's got a plot of land that he can't sell anybody.
Yeah.
And then I got my son goes to this school that emphasizes on tech people.
Yep.
Can I help you out? Is that pretty much sum it up?
Pretty much.
You could in 30 seconds give that elevator pitch?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure.
Shake your hand, and we'll definitely talk again. Okay.
Yeah. I
All right.
appreciate it big time.
This is Steve Hazlett with the Teams podcast. We're so glad to have the rock star mycologist Morgan
Rockwell.
I don't know why I forget your last name, but
I don't get that Norman Rockwell money.
the Rockwell. Yeah, the Rockwell. But you're a rock star.
I try to be.
Thank you very much. Until next time. Bye-bye.